My name's Valkyrie. The night I saved a man's life on our porch, my own parents kicked me and my children into the snow. My mother looked me dead in the eye and spat, "You always pick strays over family." But the bleeding man they left for dead was a billionaire. And what he gave me tore open every secret they tried to bury and handed me back everything they thought I'd lost. So before we begin, have you ever been abandoned by the ones who were supposed to protect you? Tell me in the comments. I read every word. The mashed potatoes were starting to congeal. I'd scooped them into a ceramic bowl shaped like a sleigh, Mom's idea, not mine, and stirred out the lumps while my kids sat quietly in the living room, eyes on the flickering tree lights like they were trying to forget where we were. Christmas Eve, supposed to be about warmth, hope, family. But this house? It pulsed with something colder than the storm outside. I heard the news anchor mumbling from the TV in the den, something about black ice and a 30-car pileup. My father didn't flinch, just sat there in his recliner with his socks half off and his glasses sliding down his nose. Typical. Mom hovered near the fridge like a judge at a cooking contest she didn't want to attend. She glanced at the roast and muttered, "Dry," then louder added, "I guess not everyone's cut out to be a wife." I didn't bite. Not this time. She clicked her tongue. "I still don't understand why you didn't stay in Dallas. You had a house. Weren't there shelters?" "Mom," I started, but she waved me off, eyes sharp. "You're 34, Valkyrie, not 16. You can't just drag your children back here every time life gets hard." "Mom, he died. He didn't leave me." Her lip curled, the way it always did when emotion entered a conversation. "Death happens to everyone. Doesn't mean the world owes you rent." Before I could fire back, a sound shattered the room. A knock. Not polite, not hesitant, just bang. We all froze. Bang. Again, heavier this time. Desperate. I dropped the spoon, heart racing. My kids, Noah and Liv, ran toward the front hall, but I caught their shoulders. "Stay behind me." The door groaned as I opened it, and there he was. A man, slumped, drenched in snow, blood smeared across his temple and seeping into his collar. His coat was torn, his face pale, barely conscious. One eye fluttered open, then closed. Noah gasped. Liv clutched my leg. The man swayed forward and collapsed. "Get me towels," I called out, stepping into the porch snow. I knelt, trying to hoist him up. His body was freezing. "What are you doing?" Mom's voice sliced through the air behind me. "Valkyrie, stop that." I glanced up. She stood at the threshold, arms crossed, eyes burning. "He's hurt." "You don't know him. He could be dangerous, drugged out, rabid." "Mom, he's bleeding." Dad appeared next to her, his mug in hand. "Call the cops. Let them deal with it." "We can't just leave him in the snow," I said. "We don't take in strays," Mom hissed. "You want to play savior again? Be my guest. But not under this roof." My breath caught. "He's not a stray. He's a person." She pointed at my kids. "And your children don't need to be around God knows who on Christmas. Think for once in your life. But I guess you never could tell the difference between real family and broken things. You always did pick strays over blood." That did it. I stood up slowly. The wind whipped across my face, bitter and loud, but not as loud as the fury burning in my chest. I turned to my kids. "Get your coats." Liv blinked. "Are we leaving?" "Yes, we are." Mom's jaw dropped. "Are you out of your mind?" "Maybe, but at least I still have one." I grabbed the red wool blanket from the hallway bench, the one Caden left me our last Christmas together. I wrapped it around the kids, bundled them close. My phone was almost dead, but I dialed 911 and gave them our address. "I'm taking him to the ER, I said. Dad muttered, "You'll regret this." Mom didn't speak, just shut the door. Not slammed. Shut. Quiet. Final. I struggled to get the man to my car, half dragging, half guiding. The kids huddled in the back seat, Liv holding her brother's hand tight. The man groaned once, then went limp again. The snow was blinding. My wipers fought uselessly against it, smearing white streaks across the windshield. My hands trembled on the wheel, not from cold, but fear. What if I was wrong? What if he died? We pulled up to the ER. A nurse rushed outside with a stretcher the moment she saw us. Male, mid-30s, blunt trauma, possible hypothermia. I choked out, voice hoarse. As they lifted him, something fell from his coat pocket. A black leather ID holder. It popped open. I leaned in. My breath hitched. He wasn't homeless, not even close. Yeah, the automatic doors of the ER parted with a hiss, and a gust of warmth hit my face. The smell of antiseptic and fluorescent light buzz surrounded me. My arms burned as I half-dragged, half-carried the bleeding man across the tiled floor, snow still clinging to my boots and his coat. A nurse sprinted forward, eyes widening as she took in the blood. "Ma'am, what happened?" I found him on our porch. He collapsed. I didn't know what else to do." The man was slipping from my grasp. Another nurse joined in, guiding him swiftly onto a stretcher. I backed away, chest heaving. "Name?" the nurse asked briskly. "I don't know. He didn't say a word. He was barely conscious." She reached toward his jacket, and I remembered the wallet, damp but intact in my coat pocket. I handed it over. She opened it right there, pulled out a driver's license. I watched her lips move as she read it, then her eyes flicked up, startled. She handed the ID to the other nurse without a word. I stepped closer, squinting at the card. Wes Thatcher. The name hit me like a slap across the mouth. Not because I knew him, but because I'd heard that name before. Years ago. News reports, heated dinner table debates. My husband's voice rising with passion as he argued about land rights and corruption. "Thatcher Ranch," he'd said more than once, shaking his head. "Those people will do anything to keep their name clean." But this man didn't look like power. He looked like he hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. And yet, something in his jawline, the weight in his silence, it matched what I remembered from a photo. I followed them down the hall, boots squeaking against the floor. Eventually, they wheeled him out of view behind swinging double doors. I was left in the waiting area, holding the hands of my kids, both shivering slightly, their faces pale. The receptionist asked me to fill out an incident form. I did, hands trembling. Then we sat. I pulled the red blanket tighter around the kids, my late husband's scent long faded but the warmth still there. They nodded off in minutes. I pulled out my phone, praying the battery held. 14%. I typed Wes Thatcher into Google. The results filled the screen fast. Thatcher Ranch, missing persons lawsuit, alleged money laundering, a whistleblower vanishing in Montana, political donations to state candidates under scrutiny. I swallowed. Hard. What in God's name had I just dragged into this hospital? I glanced at my kids, curled up on the bench beside me. I didn't have the luxury of unraveling a mystery. I just needed to keep them safe. That man, whoever he was, I wasn't about to leave him to die in the snow, but I couldn't afford to invite trouble either. And yet, I felt it in my gut. This wasn't over. I was scrolling through an old article when my phone buzzed, a message from my mother. "Stay gone, we changed the locks." No, "Are you safe?" No, "Are the kids warm?" Just 4 words. I stared at it, read it twice. A slow ache crept into my chest. Not surprise, not even anger anymore. Resignation. They didn't just shut me out, they shut out the children too. 2 kids, under 10, in the middle of a snowstorm. I turned the phone face down. "Mommy?" My daughter was awake, rubbing her eyes. "I'm hungry." I smiled softly. "We'll find something, baby." I found a vending machine around the corner, bought 2 granola bars and a bottle of water. We sat quietly as they chewed, little mouths working through the silence. Then a doctor appeared. He had dark circles under his eyes and a look of too many shifts back to back. "You brought in the man from the snow?" he asked, glancing down at a chart. "Yes," I said quickly. "Is he—" "He coded once on the table," the doctor said, voice low. "But he's stabilized. For now." Relief rushed through me like a wave. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "But," he added, flipping the chart closed, We had to get special clearance to proceed with treatment. My brows knitted. Clearance? The doctor looked at me more carefully now. He's flagged in the system. High priority. Federal level. That word, federal, sent a chill up my spine. Why? I can't say more, he said. But you should know. Security may reach out to you, since you were the one who brought him in. I nodded slowly. Okay. He offered a tight smile, then turned and walked back toward the ICU. I needed air. I told the kids I'd be right outside, stepped into the hallway, letting the quiet swallow me. The hospital hummed. Machines, nurses walking past, overhead calls. But inside me, it was just a whirl of confusion. Who was Wes Thatcher? Why was someone like that bleeding on my parents' porch in the middle of nowhere? And why did my gut say this wasn't random? Then I saw them, 2 men, standing outside the ICU doors, not in scrubs, not in hospital ID tags. One wore a black wool coat, the other a brown leather jacket over a suit. Their posture was military straight, eyes alert. The taller one stepped forward when he saw me. "You were the one who brought him in?" he asked, voice measured. I nodded. He pulled out a badge, but it wasn't hospital security, not even local law enforcement. He looked me straight in the eye. "We need to talk. Immediately." The taller one stepped forward, his black overcoat still damp from the night. He didn't introduce himself, just raised a thin leather badge holder. "Department of the Interior," it read. Not FBI, not police. Department of the Interior? The other man, broader in the shoulders and clearly more comfortable with silence, stayed a step behind but close enough to signal backup if needed. The one with the badge said calmly, "We need to ask you a few questions. Inside. Privately." I hesitated, glancing toward the ICU doors behind them. "He's alive," the quiet one finally said. "Stable, for now." That didn't make it better. They walked me to an empty room near the vending machines. The badge man motioned to the 2 plastic chairs across the table. I sat. "Name?" "Valkyrie Taylor," I answered. "You brought the man in?" "Yes. I didn't know him. I just found him." "Where?" I told them. Not every little detail, just enough to keep things truthful. They didn't write anything down, but I had a feeling they already knew the timeline. "Did he say anything to you? Anything about where he came from or who he was?" "No," I said. "He was unconscious, barely breathing, bleeding out. I think he whispered something, but it was just a groan." They exchanged a look. The taller one leaned forward. "You may have stepped into something bigger than you realize, Ms. Taylor. For your safety and your children's, it's best if you keep this night to yourself." I felt the warning tucked inside his voice, smooth like velvet, sharp like wire. When they finally left, I just stood there for a minute. My palms were damp, my knees weak. Then I turned back toward the waiting room, where my kids were still asleep. My daughter curled up on the plastic bench, my son's head leaning against her shoulder like a baby bird under a sibling's wing. I didn't wake them, just gathered their jackets, cradled my son in one arm, and nudged my daughter gently. We left the hospital in silence. The night outside had gone still, like even the wind had decided not to get involved. The only motel I could afford without questions was 15 minutes outside town, tucked behind a gas station. It had a flickering vacancy sign and smelled faintly of mildew, but the heater worked and the door locked. That was enough. After getting the kids tucked into the stiff motel beds, I sat by the cracked window and opened my phone. I typed Wes Thatcher into the search bar, dozens of results, old news headlines, most dated between 2004 and 2011. Wes Thatcher disappears amidst legal storm. Thatcher Ranch linked to federal land probe. Missing ranch heir may hold keys to whistleblower cover-up. But it was the 3rd article down that made my fingers freeze. A grainy photo, my father, standing in a church parking lot, shaking hands with Wes. The caption below read, "Community leaders announce deal with ranch heir." My breath caught. I blinked hard, reading it again. I remembered that photo. It had hung in our hallway for years. Only back then they never said his name. My parents just called it a big day, or the day the ranch deal finally closed. They said we got the second property because my father worked weekends, because we prayed hard enough, because we stayed faithful. But now I was staring at the truth. They didn't win a dispute. They got paid. And Wes? He hadn't vanished after a scandal. Maybe he vanished because he was trying to do the right thing, and got punished for it. A hot, sharp heat climbed my neck. They said I was the disappointment, the rebel, the one who chose wrong when I married John instead of staying in school or dating that youth pastor's son. They said I brought shame to the family. But what if the shame wasn't mine? What if everything, our childhood, our holidays, the house we'd been raised in was bought with silence? What if they'd built a home on secrets? I pressed my hand against the wall. I could feel the hum of the heater behind the peeling wallpaper, but inside, I was ice. I paced for a while. Then I pulled the old shoebox I kept in my duffel. It held our documents, birth certificates, my late husband's letters, some old contracts from his landscaping days, and the deed to a tiny plot of land John had bought when we were newlyweds. It was supposed to be for a garden. Now maybe it was my only key to whatever this was becoming. My daughter stirred in her sleep and whispered, "Mom?" I knelt by her side. "Shh, go back to sleep." She mumbled, "Are we going home tomorrow?" I looked at her face. So much of John's jawline, so much of my father's stubborn brow, and I said the first thing that came to me, "No, sweetheart, we're going somewhere better." She nodded without understanding. Maybe that was for the best. I stayed up, sorting papers until the motel clock ticked past midnight. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was low, distorted, like it was coming through layers of static. "You brought him in," it said. "That makes you a liability or an asset. Depends on what you do next." Then silence, no click, no hang-up, just a dead line. I sat frozen, the words still echoing in my mind. Not fear, something else, something deeper, a shift. Like the ground beneath me had quietly cracked, and now I was standing on a ledge I didn't even know existed. I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because I knew something was shifting inside me, something quiet but firm, like the ground beneath a frozen lake beginning to thaw. By the time dawn cracked through the cheap motel curtains, I was already sitting at the edge of the bed, watching frost veins spread across the window pane. The kids were still bundled together, their breath slow and soft under the motel's scratchy blankets. I poured lukewarm water into a styrofoam cup of instant coffee and stood by the tiny table, clutching it with both hands. My mind returned to that call, the voice distorted and low. "You brought him in. That makes you a liability or an asset." I hadn't said a word to the kids, not yet. But something inside me whispered back to that voice, clear and cold, "I'll be a weapon." The motel room clock read 6:43 a.m. I left a note by the lamp for the kids in case they woke up before I returned. Breakfast in an hour, stay inside, lock the door, and headed out. It was a 3-minute walk down to the diner at the corner. I needed noise. I needed stories. I needed cracks in the surface. Inside, the diner smelled like old grease and colder coffee. Locals sat in booths wearing denim and weathered flannel. They looked up when I walked in but didn't stare. That was good. I ordered a single egg, dry toast, and black coffee. The waitress poured it without asking my name. I like that too. I made small talk with the man in the booth behind me, probably in his 70s, face like an unpaved road, still wearing a rancher's cap. Said his name was Buck. I mentioned the weather, then the motel, then as casually as I could. "You remember that ranch family? What were they called? Thatcher?" His spoon paused mid-air, just for a second. Then, without looking at me, he said, "Lot of folks got burned in that mess. What happened exactly?" He pushed his plate away like he'd lost his appetite. "Some say papers were cooked, some say people got paid off to look the other way, but no one had the guts to check, or the money to fight." I nodded slowly. "Guess some stories never really end." He chuckled dryly. "They end just not the way you'd want." An hour later, I stood at the county clerk's office, trying to steady my breathing. I'd told the woman behind the glass I needed a copy of my birth certificate. "Just paperwork for the kids' school," I'd said. Then, like an afterthought, I asked, "Do you have old land transaction records from about 17 years ago?" She raised an eyebrow but handed me a digital form on a greasy touchscreen. "You'll need names. My father, Horace Lane. My mother, Margaret Lane." And, against every instinct in me, I added, "Also check for Valkyrie Lane." She typed, then frowned, clicked a few more times. "There's something from March 2008, she said. "You're listed as a co-grantee on a property out near Old Mill Road." My stomach turned. I never bought land. I was 19. "Well, the record says you signed it. Want a copy?" I nodded, swallowing the bile rising in my throat. She printed out the document. My name was there, next to my parents'. A shaky signature I barely recognized, but it was mine. I stared at it, willing it to disappear. But ink doesn't lie, unless someone tells it to. And then it came back to me, like a scent you can't place until it grabs you by the throat. A backyard barbecue. Dad had been grinning from ear to ear, drink in hand. Mom handed me a clipboard with a paper attached, told me it was just insurance stuff, said, "You trust your parents, don't you?" I was 19, dumb, and still aching to be enough for them, so I signed. I walked out of the county office like I was moving through water, each step heavier than the last. I sat in my car, hands gripping the wheel, heart pounding in my ears. They'd used me, lied to me, stolen under my name. And now they had the gall to pretend I was the one who brought shame to the family. They built their fortune on my back, I thought, and shoved me out the second I stepped out of line. By the time I returned to the motel, the kids had eaten leftover cereal bars. I thanked them for staying put and kissed their foreheads. My daughter was coloring on a napkin. My son was lining up toy cars against the wall. I sat on the floor and pulled out everything I had, news clippings, printouts, a baby photo from the county fair years ago where Wes Thatcher stood just a few feet behind me, smiling near the cotton candy stand. There it was, proof he'd known my family long before they pretended he didn't exist. I snapped photos of every document, labeled them, created backups. I even found one old legal folder my husband had left behind in our garage before he vanished. Inside, more land files, more names, more lies. I muttered to no one in particular. I wasn't a stray, I was a pawn. And then, from the bathroom, my daughter's voice cut through the silence, trembling. "Mom, someone's knocking on our window, but it's not the front, it's the back." My blood turned to stone. I shot up, scanning the room, my mind already running scenarios. I didn't wait to check. I moved straight into survival mode. I didn't waste time asking questions. I grabbed the keys, shoved them in my coat pocket, and crouched down to meet my kids' wide eyes. "Shoes on, now. We're going out the front," I whispered, keeping my voice calm even as my heart thumped like a warning drum. The cold outside smacked me awake. Snowflakes drifted sideways under the parking lot's flickering lights, soft but swirling fast. The air felt too quiet. No footsteps, no engine rumble, just the crunch of fresh snow under my boots. Then I saw him, a figure at the far edge of the lot, backlit by the dim yellow glow of a busted street lamp. Hands slowly raised, like he knew someone was watching. I moved in front of the kids, body tense. "Don't move!" I shouted, arm instinctively out like I could shield the whole world behind me. He turned slowly, and there he was, Wes. His face was a mess, gaunt, marked by old bruises, and wrapped in the kind of exhaustion you don't get from a bad night's sleep. But he was standing, breathing, alive. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice rough from cold and something deeper. "I came to tell you. Everything." Everything? That one word cracked something open in me, but I didn't let it show. I didn't say anything. Just held his eyes for a long moment, then looked back at my kids who stood frozen, clutching each other. "You know a place nearby that's safe?" I asked him quietly. He nodded. There's an old gas station out past the scrapyard, been empty for years. No cameras, no one checks it. Still gripping my keys like they were a weapon, I turned to the kids. We're taking a ride. Stay close. Don't talk. We drove slow. Snow was building fast again, turning the roads into glassy ribbons. I didn't ask questions, not yet. I just watched him through the rearview mirror, trying to catch the edges of whatever game he might be playing. By the time we pulled into the forgotten station, the kids were nodding off in the back, curled under blankets I kept in the trunk. The place was barely more than a box with broken windows boarded over, but someone had made it livable. Inside, a small corner had been swept clean and set up, 2 folding chairs, a sleeping bag, a stack of canned chili and water jugs, and taped to the peeling wall, a faded photograph. It was my grandfather, younger, wearing his sheriff badge, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. But Wes? Wes looked at the photo like it was gospel. I knew you were his blood, he said gently. You had that fire, even back then. I didn't sit. Why are you here, Wes? He motioned to the clutter around him, a folded topographic map layered with colored pins, circles, scribbled arrows. I used to work for a land firm, one of the big ones. I thought I was helping small towns grow, until I realized we weren't expanding, we were stealing. My stomach sank. They'd find old folks dying, families in grief. Probate papers would get shuffled, land would get sold off with forged signatures. Young heirs, people just turning legal age. They were the easiest to trick. A little signature here, a paper disguised as insurance there. I remembered the family barbecue. My mother's smile, the folder she slid under my hand. Just sign this, sweetheart. It's routine. Wes continued, his voice quieter now. I flagged a few cases, thought maybe it was just a fluke, but your name kept showing up, again and again. Signed, approved, transferred. And when I dug deeper, I realized your family wasn't just involved, they were one of the primary channels. I didn't respond. Couldn't. My chest was too tight to hold words. He looked at me, not with pity, but something closer to apology. I tried to leak the truth, he said, to a paper in Fort Collins. Thought if I handed them enough evidence, they'd run with it, but someone found out, and I started running. And you ended up on my porch? I remembered your name, heard your mom bragging at a Rotary Club meeting, saying she finally got rid of her bleeding heart daughter, that you were out of the picture. But when I realized you didn't know, I figured if anyone could burn it all down, it'd be you. I leaned against the wall and looked at my kids, now sleeping on a pile of coats in the corner, their innocence still intact. For now. And why should I trust you? I finally said. You shouldn't, Wes replied, but I'm not asking for your trust. I'm offering the truth. There was something in his voice that didn't beg. It invited. I sat down on the cold cement floor and stared at the map he'd drawn. My name wasn't just used. It was weaponized. They hadn't just cut me out of the family. They'd built their empire on my silence. If what you're saying is true, I whispered, barely loud enough for him to hear, then I'm going to need your help. He nodded. You're not the only one they wronged. The room felt heavier, but clearer somehow, like I was finally breathing air that hadn't been filtered through years of family lies. I plugged my phone into the portable charger Wes had taped to the wall, hoping it held enough juice. After a few seconds, the screen flickered back to life. One message. From my sister. I don't know what you did, but Dad's panicking. He's driving to Denver tomorrow. You need to be careful. I stared at the screen. My father never drove long distance, not unless someone was about to disappear. The moment I read that text, Dad's panicking. He's driving to Denver tomorrow. It hit me like a slap I hadn't seen coming. Not because of the words themselves, but because of what they stirred up. Denver. That word didn't just float by. It landed hard, pulled up something I hadn't thought of in years. I was 15, lying on the carpet in the hallway outside Dad's study, half dozing with a book over my chest. The door was cracked open an inch, just enough. I heard him on the phone, voice low, tense. "If this ever goes south, I go to Denver. You know what's in that drawer." At the time, I thought he meant some sports contract or real estate nonsense. But tonight, inside a half-frozen gas station lit only by one trembling bulb and a half-burnt candle, the memory struck different. There was a drawer in his study, middle right, always locked. He snapped if anyone touched it. And now he was going to Denver? I looked at Wes. He hadn't spoken since I showed him the message, but I could feel his eyes on me, measuring, waiting. "We need to look deeper," I said. "You said you had more." He nodded slowly, then reached beneath a stack of blankets. From a cracked tackle box, he pulled out a flash drive wrapped in a faded red sock. "This," he said, "nearly got me killed." He plugged it into the old laptop I'd charged, using the extension cord from the station's barely alive generator. The screen flickered to life, a single file, encrypted. "Password?" I asked. Wes smiled, tired, sad. "Your mother's maiden name? The first person your dad ever used to cover his tracks?" I stared at him. "I saw her signature too. Way back when, before I even knew who you were." My hands moved before I could second guess. I typed it in. The screen blinked. The file opened. It was a deposition, recorded years ago. Wes, sitting stiffly at a conference table in what looked like a government office. His voice younger, but his eyes already tired. He spoke names, dates, places, every word clear. And then, there he was, my father, not at the table. In the background of a frame, walking past the window during a recorded legal closing. Wearing that blue overcoat I remembered from every holiday photo. He didn't look up at the camera, he didn't have to. That smirk, crooked and calm, said enough. Wes's voice on the recording dropped low. "The fixer, that's what they called him. He'd offer heirs, usually young, grieving, or desperate, a scholarship in exchange for their inherited land. One signature. Sometimes they didn't even know what they were signing." My stomach turned. I scrubbed through the footage. Names flashed on documents. Then, my own. I froze. "That's me," I whispered. "That's my name. But I didn't sign this. I wasn't even in the state that month." Wes sat beside me, quiet. Then he opened another folder. This one packed with PDFs, one document after another, deeds, transfers, probate papers, all stamped, all legal, but not right. One in particular stopped me cold. It detailed the sale of land near Four Corners. It displaced a Navajo family, 3 kids under 10. No payout, just gone. My signature was on it. "They used me," I said. "They used my name. To steal, to push people out." Wes didn't argue, didn't soften it, just said, "Yeah." I stood, pacing. My chest felt tight, like the air itself had turned thick. He spoke gently. "There's one more thing." Another file loaded. A partial transcript from an interview. A name jumped out. Blake J. Finley, Bureau of Land Management. A federal official. "Your dad didn't work alone," Wes said. "He had help, high up. This guy rubber-stamped transfers all over the Southwest. Some of them, yours. They needed a clean name. Yours was gold." For a second I couldn't speak. I sat down again, heavily, like my knees gave up. I thought of the families, the ones who got letters saying the land wasn't theirs anymore, the ones who left their homes without a fight because some paper said so, because I had supposedly signed it. I wanted to scream, but screaming wouldn't fix it. I needed something else. I picked up my phone. Karina. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but I still had her number. She was a land use attorney now, last I heard. We met back when we were both just scraping by, before she left her ex-husband and I left home. She picked up after 2 rings. "Valkyrie?" "I need help," I said, "and I can't pay you." There was a pause. Then a soft chuckle. "You gave me a room and peanut butter sandwiches when I had nothing. Let me return the favor." I exhaled, my voice shaking. "I have documents, signatures, videos. I think I can prove they forged my name, and others. There's a federal agent involved, and my father." She didn't blink. "Email it all. I'll start tonight." As soon as I hung up, I sent everything, every document Wes had, every clip, every scan. 15 minutes later, she called back. "You realize they're going to come after you for this, right?" "I know," I said, "but they messed with the wrong woman. I'm a mother now. I've got nothing left to lose, and everything to protect." I glanced over at my kids, curled under borrowed blankets in the corner, safe, sleeping. Let them come. I'd been quiet long enough. Then, 3 sharp knocks. Wes stood, his hand on my shoulder. "Don't," he whispered. "Not yet." The voice on the other side of the door was soft, sweet, like a lullaby I'd forgotten. "Valkyrie? Honey? It's Mom. I know you're in there." I didn't move. That voice? Like she hadn't thrown me out. Like she hadn't laughed when I bled on the snow. I didn't move at first. My hand hovered over the doorknob like it was hot metal. Wes gave me the tiniest shake of his head, mouthing, "Don't." But my heart had already gone rogue. I opened the door. There she stood, hair pulled back into a loose bun, scarf still wrapped tightly around her neck like armor. In her gloved hands, a dented old thermos, the kind she used to bring to my soccer games when I was 11. "Honey," she said gently, like she was stepping into my childhood again. "I just want to talk. Alone." Wes stiffened behind me. I could feel him bracing, ready to intervene if anything turned ugly. I nodded at him, silently asking for a few minutes. Reluctantly, he stepped back. Mom and I walked around the side of the house, where an old bench leaned under a rusted metal awning. The sky above was dull and heavy, no wind, just stillness. She handed me the thermos without a word. It smelled like the same cinnamon-spiced coffee she used to brew in fall. For a strange, fleeting second, it almost felt like home. She sat down first, folding her hands in her lap like a schoolgirl preparing to recite a confession. Her shoulders were curled inward, not from cold, but from something heavier. "I haven't slept in 3 nights," she whispered. Her voice was raw. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Then she looked up, eyes rimmed red but dry. "He used you, Valkyrie, your father. I knew it. And I didn't stop him." My fingers tightened around the thermos. "I watched it all happen," she continued, each word grinding out like it cost her something. "The signatures, the land grab deals. I saw the contracts. I knew your name was on some of them, and I kept my mouth shut." "Why?" I asked, my voice flat. She swallowed. "Because he told me if I ever spoke up, he'd leave me with nothing. No money, no retirement. He said I'd be penniless, alone, and he'd make sure everyone believed I was the one behind it all." I stared at her, and the coffee in my hands suddenly tasted like ash. "You let him use me." Her chin dropped. I was afraid. "You called me a stray," I said, the words coming sharper than I intended. "You told me I picked garbage over family. You didn't just stay silent, you threw me out like I was diseased." Her mouth parted, stunned. I was ashamed of what we'd become, of what I'd become. And seeing you, still standing, I lashed out. I stood up, needing to put space between her words and my chest, but she grabbed my sleeve, not roughly, but like a woman who'd run out of ways to keep anyone from leaving. "I didn't come to make excuses," she said. "I came because he's getting ready to run." That stopped me. "He's transferring money into offshore accounts," she said, lowering her voice. "He's closing everything down behind my back. I think he's planning to vanish before this explodes, and leave the blame with me." I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing pearls, or that stiff lipstick red smile. She looked tired, cornered, human. "And you want me to help you," I said, "after all this?" She nodded. "I can't stop him alone, and if I don't act fast, I'll be the one facing criminal charges. He's already spoken to lawyers, said I was the one handling the paperwork. I saw the draft statements." I shook my head slowly. "So now you're scared, for yourself. Not for the families he stole from, not for the names he forged. For you." Her voice broke. "Yes, for me. Because if I go down, there'll be no one left who can point to what he really did. Silence settled between us like thick fog. Then I said, "You want my help? Here's the deal." She straightened. "You testify, on record, under oath, and you tell the whole story, start to finish. You name names, you name him, and until then, you stay away from my kids." Her lips trembled. "Valkyrie, please." "No more please," I said. "This is how it's going to be. You don't get to hide behind fear anymore." Her shoulders sagged like the words had taken the last bit of strength she had. Then, quietly, she nodded. Before we parted, she stood up, hand hovering like she wanted to touch my face. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at me with the softest grief I'd ever seen in her. "You were never the stray," she whispered. "You were the only one in this family with a soul." I said nothing. I turned and walked back to the door, locked it behind me. Wes glanced up from the kitchen table where papers and printouts lay scattered. "You okay?" "No," I replied, "but I'm done being afraid." I went to my desk, pulled out a pen, and opened the notebook I kept hidden behind the cabinet door. The one that had once held nothing but sketches and meal plans. Now it became a war map. To do: get Mom's statement, file everything with Karina, find Grandpa's original will, protect Wes, and then, at the bottom, I wrote a fifth line. I stared at it for a full minute before writing the words. "End this. For good." The storm outside had passed, but inside me, something colder was taking root. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay on the couch, watching the ceiling fan spin in the dark, while Wes slept in the recliner nearby, one hand resting protectively on our son's baby blanket. By 5:30, I was up, packing a travel bag, not with clothes, but with documents, contracts, photos, property maps, Grandpa's handwritten notes. Every lie they'd buried, I was digging up and bringing into daylight. By 6, we were on the road to Denver. The highway was quiet, a gray dawn hanging low over the frozen fields. In the back seat, both kids were bundled in blankets, their heads tipped sideways in sleep. Wes rubbed his neck, glanced at me. "You good?" "I will be," I said, "once this is done." A silence settled between us, but not the awkward kind, just the kind where two people already know what the other is thinking. I gripped the wheel tighter as we passed the exit to the town my parents still called home. They'd called me a stray, a mistake, an embarrassment. Now I was driving into the city to make sure their legacy wouldn't hurt another person again. Karina's office was in an old brick building above a diner that always smelled like burned toast and frying oil. I parked in the alley behind it, helped the kids inside, then headed up the back stairwell alone while Wes stayed in the lobby with them. When I stepped into Karina's workspace, it felt like a war room. Folders and binders lined the long table. Index cards with scribbled dates were taped along the wall, connecting photos of families. Some I remembered, some I didn't. Old deeds, satellite maps, tax forms, every corner was covered in proof. "This everything?" Karina asked, holding out a clipboard. I nodded, flipping through the final statement I'd prepared. It took me 2 days and 10 years to write. She looked at me. "Still ready?" "I've been ready since they left us in the snow." We moved to the conference room just before 9. It was sterile. Fluorescent lights, a big table, cameras in the corners. 2 federal officers stood near the hallway entrance, calm but watching. Then he walked in. My father, dressed in a dark coat, not a wrinkle on it. He carried himself like he always had, like the room belonged to him. But this time, nobody stood. He took a seat at the table, his attorney beside him, some high-dollar man with a Bluetooth earpiece and 2 white teeth, and then the door opened again. She walked in slower. My mother, no makeup. Her hair pulled back. She looked down as she took the seat next to me. She didn't reach for my hand, and I didn't offer mine. Karina started. "This deposition is being recorded. Participants have been notified of their rights. Today's testimony concerns potential violations of property law, elder coercion, and fraud involving LLC misappropriation. It all blurred after a while. Until Karina hit play. A video filled the monitor. It was Wes, sitting in his garage. Calm, measured. She was pregnant. He told her to sign, said it was just paperwork for insurance. She didn't know he'd transferred the land into a shell company. My father's jaw twitched. Then Karina reached for a manila folder and slid it to the center of the table. Exhibit G, a will, signed by Marvin Hensley, Valkyrie's grandfather, notarized, dated 3 months before his death. My father's attorney shifted. There's already a probated will? No, Karina cut him off. There's a forged version. This one was found in a safety deposit box registered under Marvin's name. We have a sworn affidavit from the bank manager who was bribed to suppress it. She turned to me. This will leaves 80% of the original land directly to Valkyrie and her children, not to the LLC, not to Randall Hensley. For a second, the room went still. Then my father pushed back from the table. This is a setup, he barked, standing. You people have no idea what you're messing with. He reached for his coat and turned toward the door, but he didn't get far. One of the officers stepped forward. Sir, sit down. He ignored him. I said sit down, the marshal repeated, voice flat now. You're under investigation for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, land misappropriation, and coercion involving vulnerable individuals. My father froze. His hand still hovered near the doorknob. Then, slowly, he let the coat slide from his fingers. My mother didn't look at him. I told him, she whispered. I told him it would come to this. Karina cleared her throat. We'll be pursuing charges unless the family requests otherwise. Valkyrie, do you want to move forward? I looked at her, then turned toward the glass wall of the office, where Wes stood holding our daughter on his hip, rocking gently. I felt something shift inside me. Yes, I want to press charges. And the land? Karina asked. Do you want to reclaim it? I shook my head. No, I want it divided. Every family he stole from, give them a share. Let them rebuild what we lost. Karina looked stunned. You could have kept it. That land's worth millions. I looked at the door my father had nearly escaped through, and then at the reflection of my daughter's face in the glass. But now, I said, I'm finally free. And the next morning, as the sun rose, so did we. I stepped out onto the soft, loamy path that curled around the garden beds, now bursting with color, marigolds, cornflowers, rows of kale and green beans pushing through earth that once knew only quiet. There were children's voices nearby, mine among them, mixed with the warm clang of garden tools, the squeak of a rusty wheelbarrow, and the faint hum of a folk song playing from an old radio on the porch. It had been exactly 1 year since the deposition. 1 year since I stood in that office lobby, watching my kids sleep on that cracked leather couch, wondering if I'd just broken our family tree or trimmed the rot so it could finally breathe again. I didn't expect peace to come with a banner or applause, but this morning, bare feet brushing against dew-drenched soil, I felt it. Not a loud peace, but the kind that finds you in the slow turning of a season, in laughter shared over garden boxes, in the way your child runs toward you with muddy hands and eyes full of light. Back then, when the sentencing came down, I didn't sit in the courtroom. Karina asked if I wanted to give a statement. Wes even offered to drive me. I shook my head. Some victories, I told them. Don't need an audience. They said he barely looked up when the judge gave him 8 years. My mother did testify. She spoke quietly, but clearly. For the first time in my life, she didn't defer to him. She didn't look at the floor. She told the truth. In exchange, she faced no prison time, but every trust account, every line of credit, every hidden fund in the Cayman Islands she'd turned a blind eye to, was frozen. And not once since has she asked me for money. She sends postcards sometimes, short ones, usually just 3 words, thinking of you. I don't reply, but I don't throw them away either. Wes and we didn't rush anything after the deposition. He was still healing, physically and otherwise. I needed to learn how to walk through the world without armor, but somehow we just kept showing up for each other. He built my daughter a tree swing last fall. My son calls him Cowboy Dad now when he's being silly. Wes rolls his eyes, but he secretly loves it. One afternoon in early spring, Karina and Wes asked me to meet them by the old grain silo. I followed them, curious, until we rounded the bend, and there it was. A single-story building with wide windows, a cedar porch, and a sign carved by hand, the Morning Glory House. I just stared. Wes rubbed the back of his neck. Your grandma used to say, broken soil grows stronger roots, right? I nodded, throat tightening. Well, Karina added, we figured this land could use a little strength. Turns out, Wes had quietly used part of his inheritance from the restructured trust to help build a community center for displaced families, food co-ops, workshops, even trauma support. He didn't ask for credit, just showed up and hauled wood alongside volunteers. It was always yours, he said gently. I just helped carry the load. And he meant it. Later that month, I visited my grandfather's grave. I hadn't gone since I was a teen, but I needed to tell him we'd done it. I knelt, placed a small tin box beside the headstone. Inside was a photo, my children standing barefoot in our garden, hands full of green shoots. Next to it, a folded note in my handwriting. We did what you asked. We made it right. Then came planting day, not for the garden, but for what came next. Families gathered from nearby towns, many of them descendants of those who'd once lived on this land before it was parceled, sold, stolen. Some were strangers, some I knew from long ago. My mother came too. She stood at the edge under an elm tree, didn't say much, but she watched, and this time, didn't look away. My daughter dropped the first seed into the furrow, palms pressed together like prayer. My son followed, digging a little too deep. Wes chuckled and helped him smooth the soil. This land was stolen, I told the group quietly, then buried, then reclaimed. Now it's alive again. The sun dipped low, casting golden shadows over everything. Someone passed around lemonade in mason jars. Children laughed, chasing each other between raised beds. And for a long time, I just sat on the porch swing beside Wes, letting the quiet hold us. He nudged my shoulder. You still think you're just a stray? I grinned. No, I think I was just looking for home. His hand found mine. And? I looked out over the garden, my kids, the new center, the community, the life we built from ashes. And I found it, I whispered, in the snow, with you. Sometimes the people they throw away are the ones who rebuild the whole world.